I am Colonel Roger McAllister, United States Army aviator, retired, and I want to share with you this afternoon some history about some events that I was involved with in South Vietnam during our conflict over there in 1966, 1967, when I was a member of what we called Alpha Battery, 2nd of the 20th, Aerial Rocket Artillery, a totally unique unit. Never had one before, and there's never been one like since. Time frame is October 1966, and as of course we all know, the North Vietnamese were resupplying, infiltrating people, material, weapons into South Vietnam to support the Viet Cong and, in fact, their own uniformed services. What had happened was by October 1966, our Semper Fi guys, the United States Marine Corps, had done a marvelous job of blocking things off east to west along the demilitarized zone between North and South Vietnam. So a church mouse would find it hard to get from North Vietnam into the South with the way the Marines were protecting that DMZ. So the end around, which is kind of famous, was the pattern that the North Vietnamese took west out of North Vietnam into Laos, Cambodia, and then turned back to the east into South Vietnam along what was called the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And in some cases, it was like a 4-lane highway. I mean, there were 4 lanes, 2 coming, 2 going. After they'd get down south and drop all their weapons and material and things, they'd turn around and head right back north again for another load. Well, again, by October '66, our buddies in the Air Force had done a great job with B-52s. And they'd come over and fly right over the Ho Chi Minh Trail up west of Vietnam, and they would just begin bombing day and night. Particularly at nighttime, because they like to move at night. It was dark, it was hard to see them. Our patrols in the daytime, infantry guys could find them if they moved in the daytime. But the B-52s would come over and just really carpet bomb that Ho Chi Minh Trail at night. So now we've sealed off the DMZ, and we've done a pretty good job of minimizing resupply of people and material on the west. What do? Well, there's an end around the other way. They would have these mass amounts of trawlers, fishing boats, leave the very southern end of North Vietnam late in the afternoon, all disguised as junk fishing vehicles, vessels. They'd sail east out into the South China Sea, cross over the demilitarized zone, head south, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning at some pre-designated site, they would come ashore and land people, weapons, medical supplies, whatever their troops in the South needed. Well, who's going to stop this little parade? Those are our swabby friends in the United States Navy, and they had these fast boats, swift boats, some of them called river boats, and these guys were tearing up and down the South China Sea, anywhere from a couple 100 meters offshore to 1, 2, 3, 5 miles sometimes out at sea. They would find these guys. And they would be patrolling those waters at night, heading these guys off, forced boarding of these vehicles, these ships, these trawlers, these sampans, and the things they found were shocking. Just wonder, some of these things just didn't sink to the bottom of the sea, that they could carry that much in weapons and material, and enemy soldiers, hidden underneath floorboards and all kinds of things. Well, the Navy was doing a pretty good job of interdicting some of that. So their response to this was, particularly up around the I-Corps where we were, near a city called Quy Nhon, a seaport and Air Force base. Just north of that, there were some pretty heavy mountains that come right down to the water's edge of the South China Sea. As the Navy boats would pass there at nighttime, sometimes even a mile or 2 offshore, all of a sudden they would boom, 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 boom. There would be these huge tracers coming out, anti-aircraft guns being fired at these naval ships 2, 3, 4 in the morning with some awfully good accuracy. There were several of them sunk, and a lot of them chewed up rather badly, and quite a few of our Navy sailors were killed in that effort. And the question was, where in the world are these guys? Because in the daytime, when people would go looking for them and sail right up next to the rocks and the mountains, nobody could find this. So where it was coming from. And so the Air Cav, 1st to the 9th, the guys that went out and scouted and looked for the enemy and more often than not found them, they had some Loaches that went out, it's a light observation helicopter, looking for what is the source of this huge anti-aircraft gun that's sinking and shooting up Navy ships at night. And true to form, there was an old joke, how does the 1st of the 9th mark an enemy machine gun position? And the answer was with a burning helicopter is how they do it. These were gutsy guys, very courageous, young warrant officers, 18, 19, 20 years old. Names of cities and towns in the U.S. I've never heard of, a lot of them from the South. Yeah, bold, courageous, redneck kids, and they weren't afraid of anything. And so on October 9th, I believe it was, there was a Loach out looking for this location that day, and they did find it, and they did mark it with a burning helicopter, but as the Loach hit the water, put the fire out, and the pilot and his spotter were able to swim ashore, but now we know where it is. Yeah, other observers at the time were able to see this slit trench opening about 1.5 feet high and maybe 5 or 6 feet wide, a very narrow opening, just natural erosion into the side of the mountain where this cave was. We had some LRP teams, some infantry guys down along the beach and the water's edge who were going to try to scale up or scale down and get into this cave and take out the bad guys. But whenever anybody got near that, they would get that or other weapons out the opening and shoot at the guys on the beach or up above. They looked at maybe have some phantoms come in and fly at the side of the mountain and slap some napalm in it. And not only did they say the chances they're getting it in that window were 0 to none, the splash of the napalm with some of our American LRP teams around would be not too healthy for them. So what in the world are we going to do? And somebody said, wait a minute. I think the tactical air commander that was out there, Air Force guy typically, about captain or a major flying like a bird dog, he said, let's call that 1st Cav group, that 2nd of the 20th Aerial Rocket Artillery. They have something called a wire-guided missile that they can launch, and actually with a whiz wheel-like controller stick, they can actually fly this thing through the air and aim it at the target. I happened to be the pilot for that particular weapon system. What had happened by October of '66, all the original 1st Cav pilots that had come over on the ship and went into the high drang with Al Moore, they'd all had their time up. They were rotating and they'd gone home. So I was now the senior pilot in the 2nd of the 20th Artillery. And so as this new weapon system came in, they gave it to me and they said, Lieutenant, get together with your team and find a way to make this work. We want to be able to fly these wire-guided missiles, off of the helicopter into enemy tanks, concrete bunkers, heavily reinforced positions. We took some of these wire-guided missiles out of their crates. We went down to the flight line. And I have to tell you, it certainly wasn't me, but some of the electronics guys, crew chiefs, other mechanics, avionics people that worked on the aircraft, they came up with a solution, whereas they would remove, all of our our 48 rockets and use the guide rails and the hard points along the side of the helicopter to mount 2, 4, in fact 6 finally, SS-11 wire-guided missiles on the helicopter to be fired. This missile was really known as an NTAC weapon. It was a French anti-tank weapon that heretofore had been fired on the ground out of a box with a slight elevation on it, a big spool of wire behind it, and a controller pad, just like some of the Nintendo games. So we went down the flight line, and the great American ingenuity of these young guys, young people, 3, 4, 5 years in the Army at best. And they would become masters not only at the trade of what they were supposed to do, but now faced with a whole new weapon system to try to adapt that to a American Army helicopter and make it fire from the air, and so we could still control it and get it to an enemy position. That's just part of that great ingenuity and American spirit of an American soldier who is always going to find a way to get the job done. So these young guys were the ones that figured out, and they fixed it up so we could have 6 missiles, 3 on either side. Although they found a way, and it was great for practicing to have 3 missiles on either side, that took one whole helicopter out of the system, if you will, for day-to-day usage of the standard use of using the helicopter rocket ships to insert troops on the ground, respond to fire missions, shoot these 48 rockets to take the bad guys out. We couldn't do that if we had this helicopter with just 6 missiles on it. So the optimum configuration that we finally figured out was, let's keep 36 rockets on one helicopter and then 1 missile on either side. Now I got 2 missiles, I got 36 rockets, I can play either game. I can do regular kind of fire mission stuff, I can do insertion items, and if we need surgical strikes on bunkers, things of that nature, we've got 2 SS-11 wire-guided missiles. We only set that up on 1 ship, and that, as I say, if you put too many rockets on too many ships, you become so specialized that you're only going to use a weapon like this about once a month in practical terms. You could use it more often, but you'd be, using a sledgehammer to kill a fly. And the supply of these missiles was somewhat limited. We were buying them from the French. So the ideal circumstance was 36 rockets and 2 missiles. As I said, the fact that was up there that day, he said, in layman's terms now, get a hold of those 2nd and the 20th guys. They have wire-guided missile that, maybe they can fly right in that hole. So there were a lot of helicopters up there. It was almost like the bank robbery on the news day with all the local helicopters flying up there trying to get a picture of the getaway car. There had to be probably a dozen helicopters flying high and away so they didn't get shot down like the Loach. All of them up there, they wanted to be in on the game, and the word came back to the unit, and we weren't that far away. The old man called up and said, get Lieutenant McAllister up here with that wire-guided missile. We got a big target. We got to take care of this. We got to help out the infantry. So I took off with the ship. I was told to bring the SS-11 and get out there, boogie right now. And so I got the briefing in the air as to what it was, that we'd all heard the stories about the Navy ships being shot at night and a couple of them being sunk, but it was all a mystery until this particular day, October 9th. And so I got the briefing in the air as to what it was all about. The Loach had been shot down, and that they couldn't use napalm and a number of other things against that. The splash factor would get the U.S. troops. So, I was going to have 2 shots. That's all I was going to have to take this this bunker out. So I arrived in the area, and as I did, I flew kind of south to north. I stayed offshore, probably 1,500 meters or more out from where this slit opening in the bunker was. And that's far enough away that that he didn't want to be shooting at me. He provides himself too big of a target with his tracer rounds coming out. So at 1,500 meters or so, he was not shooting at me or anybody else who was staying that far or further away. So we were able to get a pretty good look at it, and we flew up pretty high over it at a level of which we knew he couldn't elevate that gun any higher than that, so we got clear above that. We were able to see kind of on a slant, a bias, what the size of this looked like, what tones in the rock were, where the opening actually was. We were then encouraged by the battalion commander of the 06 says, Falcon 27 Alpha, let's get on with it. Now you do have to do some prep, to get this right and decide what altitude you're going to be at, what airspeed you're going to fly at, what azimuth you're going to take into the target, how much above the target you're going to be. All those decisions have to be made, and you do that through some analysis, through looking at the target picture and seeing what the threat is. Once that was done, and it was done very quickly, we set up on an azimuth almost 270 due west, and my co-pilot, a marvelous young guy who was my co-pilot most of the time, his name was Alejandro McIntyre. So I told him, let's stay about 80 feet in the air. The bunker was maybe 50 feet off the water, 270, hot, straight, and normal, no moving around, and the technology behind it is that the helicopter has to remain as stable as is humanly possible, because any little movement in the air, any buffeting air pockets, movement left or right, anything that happens to that helicopter is also going to happen to that missile that's out there because of the gyro systems that are driving it. Then you add my human error to the puzzle, and we've all got to be in this together, and everybody's got to get it right. At about 1,200 meters, we fired because I was able to make out the caves pretty well. I launched at 1,200 meters. By the time we were at about 800 meters, we'd made up 400 meters pretty quickly. The missile was about to impact through the mouth of the cave, touchdown, and at the very last second there was a little bit of a bump in something, and the missile went high right, about a foot up above the bunker. Huge explosion into the rock. Did no damage to the mountain, so to speak, and we missed. So we got loaded up. We came back again, same thing, 1,200 meters launched. Got the rocket, a little bit above the bunker, centered all the way in, and as it got down to zero, I just slid it right into that opening, and I could see the fiberglass. It has great big fins, about like that, come off the back of it to stabilize this missile. And they're made out of fiberglass. They were sheared off, and you could see them burst into air as the missile went through the slot, and the fins flew everywhere, and nothing happened. It takes much longer to tell you this than it did in real life. It probably wasn't 2 or 3 seconds, but during that period of time, we both used some 4-letter words, followed by, "It's a dud." Here's this perfect shot right through the window, and it's a dud. Well, that's what we thought for 3 or 4 seconds. In fact, what happened was it sheared it off, it went through the window, and it flew another about 110, 20 meters all the way to the back end of this cave, because it was a long cave, over longer than a football field. Hit against the wall of the back part of the cave, got their fuel and ammo. This was the fuel and ammo resupply page for the North Vietnamese and these sampans coming in at night. And it got them, and then there was a huge fireball that came flaming out the window of the cave. And it was just, everybody was elated. I mean, their radio discipline went to hell. I even had the old man on the radio, Mac does a great shot, and Lieutenant McAllister broke all kinds of things. We shouldn't be using names over the air. And it was a big hit when the LRPs got up there to look through there. They did a body count, and there were 102 North Vietnamese Army in there. And also, which they then discovered, in a cave right next door, had no access from the sea, but only a tunnel like going into the ground and underneath this mountain into the cave next door to the one we shot, was another compartment with 55 more soldiers inside. But after they felt the whole mountain shake and saw our guys dragging all these bodies out of the cave that we fired the missile in, 55 of these guys came out with their hands up in the air, you know. King's X, we quit, surrender, Chu Hoi is what they used to say all the time, Chu Hoi. They were turning themselves in. They didn't want to fight anymore. I sometimes call it the shot heard round the world, in that the story of the shot that day, for the next couple of years I was still in the Army. I heard about it at Fort Walters, Texas, and I heard about it at Fort Rucker, Alabama, and I heard about it in 2 or 3 places in Germany. And it became mythological at that point. A lot of people, oh, that couldn't really have happened, you know. Well, somebody just made that up, you know. It's kind of like the King Arthur thing, you know. Was there really a King Arthur or not? It's even published in the big First Cav book, that's First Cav in Vietnam. It says something like 1965 to 1972. It's published in there. It doesn't have my name on it. That's not important, but it was a big enough event the First Cav thought to include it in their history in Vietnam, and I was blessed to be the guy at the wheel, considering it was a success. Had it been a failure, they probably would have put my name in there.